Hi, besties. I had a notion today to try something I haven't done in years, like years and years and years. Don't know if I can do it anymore, but I want to see if I can regain the skill. And that is spinning feathers into my yarn. So, what I have here is a bin of feathers. Seems like you'd need those to spin feathers into yarn, obviously. These are just some floral picks that I got from Michael's on clearance. I think I paid like $1 for a huge bundle of them. But regardless, wherever you get your feathers from, you want ones that are relatively floppy. You don't want a really stiff shaft on them. So some of these are better than others. I'm going to core spin it. So I have my mohair core here. And I have some combed BFL. I'm going to go with white so we can see the contrast with the feathers really well, so we can see how it works out. Now, I may have completely lost my ability to do this. I don't know. I vaguely remember doing it at one point and it actually working. It may not work for me anymore. We're going to find out. So let me adjust the camera and we'll tackle this. It's going to be fun. It may not work, but it's going to be fun. So the first thing we need to do is prepare some feathers. So from my little bin I have here, I'm going to choose some, ooh, this one's pretty. Can you see the iridescence on it? I think they're pheasant feathers, but I'm not real good with birds, so we'll just grab a couple for now. I have blues and purples. Oh, there's a cute little purple. All right, now the other thing I need is I have a pair of needle nose pliers right here, and I need a pair of scissors. Okay, so what we need to do is we need to soften up the shaft of the feather. So you can see how it's very stiff up to a certain point before it starts to bend. We want a little bit of that to anchor the feather, but we don't want the whole thing. But we do want to break it up so it's a little bendier. So I just grip it between the tips of the pliers and then just wrap the feather around. Oops. And that'll kind of break up the shaft a little bit. And then I'm going to go once in the other direction. Don't worry about keeping the feather, flat and pretty, because this is how we want it to look in the yarn. It's sort of spiky and sticky out. And then for a final one, we're just going to grip the feather and just run it over. So we've kind of broken that up a bit. I'm just going to prep a couple of feathers here, and then we're going to attempt to spin them in. Let's start with our spinning. So we need our core. Put it down on the floor. And so there's our core. And then we need our fiber. So this is some BFL that I've processed myself and combed out. All right, let's get started on this. And I'm just gonna core spin. Now, depending on how fluffy you want your yarn when you're core spinning, if you want it really fluffy, you come in from the side and let it be fluffy. I like it to wrap a little tighter, so I just kind of pull it down so it wraps the core. All right, we're going to add our first feather. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to break off the yarn, or the fiber I should say, and I'm going to grab my core and I'm going to get up to the point where the shaft starts to soften. So I'll clip that off. Then I'm going to wrap that core around the shaft of the feather. Just spin it a few times to kind of get that locked into the core. All right, now I'm going to go back to spinning, and we're going to wrap around that bit of the shaft, then take that back, pull our feather out, and wrap the feather around both the core and the fiber. Then when we get to the tip of the feather, we're going to switch back again, and we're going to wrap that tip of the feather into it, and there we go. Apparently I can still do it. It just gives the coolest texture. Now, in the process of doing that, I have probably overspun by like a gazillion. So what I'm going to do is just get my next chunk of roving on here and just let some of that twist out and then go back to spinning. And then our feather is secured in the fiber. So now I'm just going to go a little further. I'm going to get that feather up onto the bobbin before I add another one. Just going to hand wrap it to get it around those guides. A little more. Okay, so it's on the bobbin now. You probably can't see that. Let me just adjust. So there, the feather's on the bobbin. So now I'm going to work on the next one. So I'm going to break off that chunk of fiber, hold it over here, grab my next feather. I'm going to trim off the hardest part of the shaft, slide it under my core, then wrap it. A few times. Then I'm going to hold it against the core. Oops. Then I'm going to core spin right over the end of that just to extra lock it in. And I might go back and forth a couple of times. That's better. All right, now I'm going to grab my feather and I'm going to switch places. So I'm going to bring my core over, or my fiber over to my core. This one might be a little stiff, but we're going to give it a shot. And we're going to core spin the feather over the core and the fiber till we get to the tip. Then we're going to switch back to our fiber. And we're going to wrap over the end of that feather and then continue down our core. And there, we have another feather on there. So now I'm going to get this feather onto the bobbin before I add the next one. I'm going to let some of that twist out. I got a bit built up. And increase my uptake a little bit so it's pulling it on a little faster. Okay, so the next feather is on the bobbin. Just going to spin a little more and break off my fiber, switch my fiber back, get the next feather, trim off the really hard part of the shaft. Oh yeah, you're gonna have feathers everywhere, by the way. Okay. Now switch back to my fiber. And spin over the end of that. And we're going to go back and forth a couple of times. Then we're going to switch. And we're going to core spin our feather on. Now I think what I'm going to do this time to secure that feather even more is I'm going to take my core and I'm going to spin that for a couple of wraps over the end of that feather, and then I'll go back to using the fiber over the core. See that? Isn't that cool? I can't believe I can still do this. All right. Now, I've showed you the basics, so I'm going to keep working my way through this. I'm going to make up some feather yarn. As we know, I don't like a single, so I am going to ply it. So I'll come back when we're ready to ply. Look at all these feather bits all over me. Yes, so I'll come back when we're ready to ply and we'll go over that. And then in the end, we'll make up a sample and see how it looks when we actually use the feather yarn in a project. I think this is going to be fun. 1 second. So I spun a couple of feet and now we're going to ply. I've got feathers everywhere. It's like a bird exploded in here. My kitty cats for some reason don't seem to mind. I fell back on the comfortable and I spun S and I'm going to ply Z, which has been how I've spun since time immemorial because of my crocheting background. And I'm going to use this silk thread to ply with. So I'll plop that between my feet. Get the leader charged up. All right. And grab our yarn. Tie our ends together. And let's see if we can ply this without losing our feathers. Just going to bring the wheel a little bit closer. Increase my uptake. And I'm trying to kind of spiral ply it a bit just to give it some more texture. And we're coming to our first feather. So I'm going to just get all the way down to here. All right, now where the feather anchors, I'm going to do a cocoon on the tip with my silk thread. And then I'm going to try and keep that texture in there by wrapping the feather around, and then cocoon at the other end and back to plying. Right, so we're coming to our next feather. I'm going to cocoon on the end. Then I'm going to go straight in from the side so it core spins around the plying thread. Now I could feel the resistance of that end, so I stopped fighting it, and I'll just make a cocoon and I'll go back to plying. Okay, cocoon at the end, come in from the side and core wrap. Come on, a little more, just a little bit more. Okay, there we go. Little cocoon at the end. That one kind of went messy, but that's all right. Now this is like taking some intense concentration and a lot of time to make, and I am loving every second of it. It's definitely not for everybody, but I am just loving this. This is so much fun to me. Okay, now I'm going to cocoon on the end. Right, next feather, we're going to cocoon over that end. And we're going to bring this in from the side. Just trying to flip it so those spikes come out more. Cocoon. And then back to plying. I think I left too much of a shaft on that feather. It felt very, very stiff. So I may have some difficulties in using it in like a knitting swatch. It'd be perfect for weaving. Okay, we'll cocoon. And then come in from the side. Just going to take a bit of twist out of that so that it fluffs up some more. Then cocoon on the end. And back to plying. Oh, Bobo's coming over to help. His version of help anyways. Okay. Cocoon at the end. Come in from the side. I'm just untwist that a bit. See if we can get it to fluff out a bit more. And then cocoon at the other end. And then back to plying. Oh, Bobo incoming. Don't know if you guys will see him. I think he's out of camera range. Cocoon in from the side. Cocoon. And then back to plying. The end, and then from the side, cocoon again, and back to plying. One more feather, I think. Cocoon at the end, and from the side, get it all nice and fluffy, and then cocoon the end. And back to plying. Oh, I have reached the end. So I'll just run out some extra twist. Okay, clip off our end. Tie this off. And let's get it onto our body naughty and have a look. All right, so here's our yarn with our feathers in it, and it is an over twisted mess. A good steaming would help it. It's actually not as bad as I thought it would be for over twist. But I'm going to ball that up, and we're going to do some knitting with it. Let me just untangle it here. Actually, it's not too bad for over twist. All right, let me grab my knitting needles and we'll knit up a swatch. All right, I have my bag of miscellaneous crafting tools. Let's find out what a recommended size is. So, if you don't know what size needles to use with your hand spun, just take it, fold it in half, and if you have a needle gauge, just figure out what hole it fits through easily. So this would be about an 8, which is a US 8, which would be a 5 millimeter. So I'm going to go up to a 6, which will be a looser gauge, but that's what I'm going to do. But that's how you figure out approximately what size needles you should use with your hand spun. And you can test it in a couple of places, because if it's not consistent, you know, you'll want to get a rough idea. So I'm going to go with a 6. All right. Here's my size 6 knitting needles. Okay. I'm not going to make a wide swatch. I'm just going like 8 stitches worth. So we'll have a long swatch. Okay, so here's our first feather, and I'm just hooking up the cocoon here. Get that in there. And it landed right on the end, so we've got like some fun stuff going here. Now when I knit, I always slip my first stitch purlwise to make for a tidier edge. And now I'll be knitting back into that feather, so let's see what happens. I've never knit with feathered yarn. I've crocheted and I've woven with it, but I've never knit with it. So this is kind of a fun experiment for me. Okay. So it just looks like a mess on that first one, but let's see how the next one works in. I'm just doing snake stitch. Sorry, garter stitch. Our most common snake around here is a garter snake. And for some reason, I can never remember garter stitch. It's always snake stitch in my head. Don't ask me why. It's just the way my brain works. But that's why I call it snake stitch. All right. We're into our next feather. It looks like they're all going to land right about the same place because I sort of planned that. Now we're coming to the cocoon at the end of the feather where the shaft or the tip would be. There was really no stiffness in that, so that worked out all right. Oh, I got to show you guys something. Hold on. He's always got to be nearby. I had that bat sitting on that cabinet to be spun, and I'm never going to get to spin it because he has claimed it as his bed and he is spoiled, so he's going to get to keep it. That's now his bed. Just because he's always got to be near me. Oh, my baby. Okay, back to work. Tip it down a little bit more. Don't need to see my face. You need to see what my hands are doing. Okay, here we go. So now that's 2 feathers in there. That second one went much better. I quite enjoyed knitting that one in. So we can say I'm relatively consistent because all my feathers are landing in the exact same place. Okay, this one has a fairly stiff shaft on it, so let's see how it knits up. Okay, there's the shaft, so I just pulled it through and it's fine. So this is going to have pokey bits, so you wouldn't want this like against your neck or anything, but maybe it's like a detail on an edging somewhere would be cool. All right, so all the feathers are landing on the edges. Hold on. My audiobook started playing. So I think what I'm going to do, but you can see how that kind of looks really cool, right? It's very soft too. I think I'm going to tear it out and I'm going to go with more stitches and try to get it in the middle of the pattern more rather than on the turns as it is right now. Trick is going to be frogging this might be a little tricky. There we go. There we go. Okay, you don't need to watch me struggle to knit again, so I'll come back when I've knit my second swatch and I'll show you. I got up to get a cookie and a cuppa, and look what I come back to. Uh-huh. Yep, that's right. He stole my chair. Brat. So here's the swatch. So this feather here was way too stiff on the shaft and it ended up popping out of the yarn. But I think it still kind of looks cool. I don't think it's going to go anywhere because it's secured pretty good. And this is what it looks like. And here's the other side. Now the feathers do tend to go more one side than the other, which is fine. Then you have a textured side. And it's kind of fun and funky. That was just a little sample. And now that I've got my groove back a little bit, I think I might spin up more and try again. You can see here, this shaft of the feather was too stiff. and it ended up sticking out through the fabric. So I just need to trim them up a little further and make a softer shaft so that they end up doing like these ones here and just blending into the yarn. But despite it being years, I can still spin feathers into yarn, and it was very fun. So I hope you enjoyed this little adventure into chaos, and maybe try it yourself if you think it appeals to you in any way. I enjoy it. I think it's a very fun thing to do, and it stretches my skills to new levels and new challenges. So thanks for joining me, guys, and I shall see you in the next one. Dr. Chaos out.